Hi guys. Hey, so I'm here with the third episode, I believe, of Reading Life, and I want to tell you about some books I have been reading recently. And this time it is 3 graphic novels. I love graphic novels. And these happen to all be for kids, but I think they appeal to some adults as well. I mean, they have all appealed to me. So let's start with the first one. Oh, and you can probably tell this is a library book. All 3 of these are library books because I can't afford to buy all of the books that I read. I read a lot. And yeah, I avail myself of the library services in Minneapolis, and we actually have a really good library here. We get a lot of contemporary stuff, and you can always request that the library gets certain books as well, and sometimes they respond to that. So, this first one is called Parachute Kids by Betty Tang, and this is sort of a memoir-ish, but not completely. Let me read you what she says about that. It's not a memoir, but a mixture of fiction, my family's first experiences in America, and anecdotes of immigrant friends I met along the way. So, it is fictionalized. And it is told through the eyes of 10-year-old Feng Li is what they call her. And the kind of the first thing that you get, one of the early things that you learn, is that they all have American names as well. They choose American names because they have to have something that Americans can pronounce and easily remember. And so Feng Li's name is kind of changed to Anne while she's in America. And it's told mostly through her point of view, but it is about the 3 kids in this family. And it starts out with the 3 of them going on vacation with their parents in 1981 from Taiwan, where they live. They come to Los Angeles for a vacation. And they go to all of the places. They go to Disneyland, which Feng Li, or Anne, is very excited about. And they go to Universal Studios, Hollywood, all the good stuff. And then when Feng Li is actually writing postcards to her friends to send back to her friends, because they're there for several weeks, so she misses her friends. And then she sees they've got a couple weeks left, I think, but in any case, she sees mom and dad packing, and she's like, are we going home already? And then they kind of spring the news on the kids that actually they'll be staying here. Dad is going back to Taiwan, but they are going to stay here. And they're kind of shocked, you can tell. Although the older sister already knew, so she's not shocked, which the older brother gets kind of mad about, that she knew and she didn't tell them. But they are going to have to stay there because the parents want them to have better opportunities and go to school here. And they don't really say this in the book, although she talks about it in the author's note, how, she didn't realize it when she was 10 years old, but her parents were trying to get away from possible war. They were really worried about the political situation in Taiwan at the time. And so that's one of the reasons that they want the kids to stay in America. another reason is that the older brother is getting in trouble with kids back home, and they want him to make some new friends, some better friends, they say. So they're going to have to stay here. Now, they're not completely on their own. Mom is staying with them at first, although she eventually has to go back to Taiwan. But they have some friends very near where they're like renting a house, and they call them auntie and uncle, but they're not really relatives. They just are friends that they use that familiar term with. But those adults help them, especially Auntie Lynn. She teaches the older girl how to cook, which is really important because she's in charge of like feeding the three of them. And she's a terrible cook at first, unfortunately for them, but she does learn. And so they are thrust into American culture, and the older two know some English, so they have an advantage over Anne. Here she is choosing her name because she thinks it looks easy, easy to remember, easy to spell. But when she goes into American school, she doesn't know a word of English, which just sounds absolutely terrifying. I cannot imagine, sitting in school all day long, not understanding the teacher, not understanding the kids, not being able to read the books. It just sounds like quite a challenge that these kids go through. And evidently, it's not uncommon for a lot of Asian families to do this, even now, to bring their kids here and leave them with friends and or relatives, so they can get better opportunities than they could get back home. So they choose their new names, and the bulk of the book is about them trying to fit in and the difficulties each one of them has, being at different ages. They're going to have different challenges. So Anne has a really hard time at first. Here's what it looks like to her when she's trying to read English, blah, 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 blah. But she does get a tutor in class, and that helps her learn English. And she starts studying really hard, and eventually starts getting it. The older sister, her challenge is that they're near the end, or like on the second half of the year, and so she's nearing the end of her junior year, and she wants to be able to take the SAT for college, and so she's got several months, which is not very long. October, and it's like, shoot, I can't remember when. When was it? February? They got her? Yeah, February. Okay, so month 2 to month 10, she's got about 8 months to be able to not only learn English, reading and writing, but take the American SAT and get a good enough score to get into college. So she's got quite the challenge. And here we see the brother, and he gets into trouble after not very long. He's very angry about having to be there when it wasn't his choice. And then people make fun of them. This is horrible. I just can't even. I hope none of that happens today. I mean, hopefully it's not that bad today, but I can see that happening in the 80s. pretty bad. So he's angry, and then at some point he is defending his sister, his older sister, when some people are making fun of her, and he kind of gets in a fight with this older boy, or he threatens him, and then acts like he knows kung fu, and he doesn't. So later when the boy confronts him, he runs away and they catch up with him and they beat him up, unfortunately. Okay, so here is where Mom says she did not get an extension on her visa, so she has to leave. So now it's just the three of them, the kids, and they have to, not only go to school, get good grades, try and fit in, but take care of themselves completely. So Mom shows the older sister the budget that they have and some cooking. She learns some cooking skills from Mom before she leaves, but not a lot. So it's quite the challenge. So here's another instance where they have to get used to different customs in America. The older sister is used to using a sun or an umbrella for sun, keeping out of the sun, and this kid is teasing her and saying it's for rain, not for sun. It doesn't make sense to Americans to use an umbrella for sun. And their cousin, the child of auntie and uncle, tells them that they just get tan here. They don't worry about the sun so much, and they don't use umbrellas for it, definitely. And here's the brother pretending that he knows kung fu. So yeah, she's getting used to different customs. And here's Anne trying to spell, because they have spelling tests. And she does not do well at first. And here's the other girl in class that Anne sits next to, who is Chinese American, and she was actually born in America, but other kids are now assuming that she knows Chinese and can talk to Anne in Chinese, when actually it's very hard for her. And she's mad at Anne at first for kind of, I don't know, maybe taking her place as the special different one in class, but eventually they do become friends. So even though they do depend a little bit on Auntie and Uncle Lin, their friends or their parents' friends, to help them out, at a certain point they even lose that support system because the father gets a job in Boston and they have to move across the country. So then they're really by themselves. And it's pretty tricky because, I mean, none of them are adults and they really shouldn't be living this way unsupervised, but they're doing the best they can. And the mom is trying to get back, is working on getting back to them, but it's taking a while. Meanwhile, they do get into some trouble. The older sister gets scammed by some people who take advantage of their situation. They call her and tell her they're from the government, and they're going to go to jail if they don't pay this money. And if they do pay it, then they'll be totally legal. And, it's all lies. But she doesn't know that. And she's afraid to bother their parents with it. And so she pays the money and actually loses their money. So that is really rough when she finds out that there's the fake government agent and a check for $10,000 that she gives them. It's really sad. And then the brother is getting into trouble because he's hanging out with the wrong people again. But you can hardly blame him. He's hanging out with other kids who were in the same situation as him. Asian kids who were put here by their parents for whatever reason. There's a variety of reasons. And they're trying to give them a better opportunity. Meanwhile, they're shoplifting and smoking, and I think they're drinking too. I'm not sure if they show that. So sometimes here you see Anne trying to help out at the house when her older sister is really, I think she's depressed because of being tricked. And so she's kind of just staying in bed because she doesn't know what to do. She feels like she's really screwed up. So then Anne gets into trouble because she really wants a Nintendo Game Boy because that's what everyone else has at the time. And she doesn't have the money for it, and so she tries to steal it. She tries to shoplift it. And then she's in trouble because they're like, we need to call your parents. And of course her parents are not there. And her sister's not answering the phone. So she's really worried about what's going to happen when they find out that she doesn't have parents at home. And here is an interesting episode where the older brother is hanging out with one of these other kids, actually the kind of the leader of this group of kids, and I don't know if he misreads the signals. It doesn't look like it. It looks like both of them really like each other, and brother goes to kiss this other boy, and then here's the bully from school who sees them, and then the other boy is like, get away from me. And of course he makes fun of them, calls them sissies. Oh, that's so 80s. That's awful. So then the brother feels kind of ashamed, and they are pushing each other, and he accidentally pushes the brother down this embankment, and he is injured enough that he has to go to the hospital. So then they finally call their parents and tell them what's been going on. And it all turns out okay. This is not a, tragedy. It is for kids. I think it's age appropriate, 8 to 12, that age range. Nothing super bad happens, and they do recover from it. But I thought it was a really interesting look into, a kid's experience that I never would have known about. I didn't know this happened with Asian families, probably other families too that want to get to America. And yeah, because I know one of my friends used to work at a high school, and she would talk about Somali kids and Hmong kids who were living with relatives or friends of relatives, and how they didn't have their parents around, and what a challenge that was for them, on top of all of the schoolwork that they were trying to keep up with. Here they had to, learn how to take care of themselves, basically, and get through all the emotional stuff in high school. Quite a challenge. Okay, so that's that book. Next we have Mexikid by Pedro Martin. And I guess this was first a web comic, I think that's right. And it was like a very long running web comic where he wrote about his family. And this is a memoir, it says right on the front there. I think it's for about the same age range, maybe a little older, but it's a great story. First, he tells about his family, the Martin family, and it's quite a big family. He's got 8 siblings, brothers and sisters. And first, he tells his description of all the other siblings, and then he lets them tell about him, which is pretty funny, because he's a nerd, and this is 1977, and that was back when nerds were not cool. So he's into superheroes and action figures, but they call them dolls. He collects dolls, says his little brother. So they don't really get him. He is already drawing at this age, and here's one of his brothers says he draws pretty good, except for the hands. He sucks at hands. They're kind of brutal. So you see life in the Martin family, and the big event that's happening in this book is that they're going to Mexico, 2,000 miles away from where they live in Watsonville, California, to pick up grandfather and bring him back with them to live. So it's told from the point of view of Pedro, obviously, and he's kind of in the middle. He's not the littlest kid, and he's not the oldest kid. I think he's around 11 or 12 when this happens. And they go on this big trip in their fancy motorhome, which his dad is very proud of. And so you see like all the preparations. And he's watching Happy Days, which that brings back memories. I grew up in the 70s and used to watch Happy Days too. So they pack, they go to, they go to Kmart to get their essentials. And I love this, how the father tells them, go and get your essentials, what you guys need for yourself on the trip. And when I whistle, it's time to leave. And evidently he has this intense whistle that they can hear from all over the store. And then they come running when it's time to go. But I love how he shows that each one of them has different ideas of what the essentials are. The older brothers are getting records. Mom is getting the little boys chones, which is underwear. And Lila, who is like the family historian and cultural historian as well, she is always taking any opportunity to teach the other kids their cultural history. And of course, Pedro gets action heroes. That's his essentials. And some of the other kids, like Noe, is getting clothes. He's into fashion. And then we find out that Pedro really doesn't know much about his grandfather. He's heard from other family members that he was in the Mexican Revolution. And it turns out, Dad says, actually he spent most of his time in between it. And what he did was he ran a mule train to the different sides and got them food to eat. And so both sides were interested in keeping him safe so that they could get their food. Of course, he wasn't unbiased. He didn't give the greatest food to the federales. So that's kind of funny. And let's see, there's the whistle. Gets them all together and they get going on the road. And Pedro talks some more about things in their family, music, what he calls chuntata music, which sounds like Mexican waltz. And he talks about the mariachis. El motorhome. Here's a map of where they're going. And here's a map of the actual motorhome itself. And all the fancy fancy features in the motorhome. And they have the older kids. Not everybody can fit in the motorhome, so the older kids are driving a truck behind the motorhome. And they keep in touch with each other through a CB radio, which is really fun. And here we have Mom bringing all of the actual necessary items that they're going to need, like toilet paper and different foods, rice, beans, salt. And the kids munching and getting Cheerios all over the floor before they've even left. Mom trying to sweep in the motorhome. So some of the adventures they have involve stopping at friends on the way on this long trip, and usually it's somebody's godparents that they stop and stay with for the night, and whoever's godparents it is, they usually get money. And here's his brother saying, hey, these are my padrinos, so I got the money. And Pedro's like, ah, dang. Some of the food that they eat. Oh, and they're playing supermarket with all of their toys. And then actually they get a bunch of donations from friends and neighbors because Mom wants to bring them into the town in Mexico where they're going, because those people are pretty poor and she wants to be able to donate toys and clothes to those families when they get there. Well, they end up not being able to do that because when they get to the border guards think it's contraband because they have so much of it. They think, oh, you must be, selling it. And they don't believe when the kids and the parents say that, no, they're bringing it to give to the poor. And it doesn't help that the kids were playing supermarket. They were playing Kmart before they got to the border. And so they have written price tags on a lot of the stuff. So the border guards take a lot of the things that they were going to donate, which is unfortunate and not fair. But their parents try and reassure them that when they get to Mexico, they'll be able to go to, the Mexican market and find some replacements for some of their toys and comic books and those things. They do, this is kind of funny, this is like a recurring gag, that they have a tape recorder and they've taped a bunch of stuff to bring with them, and one of the things is the music from the Music Man, including that horrible song, Shapoopy, which I hate to even say it. Oh, it's such an annoying song. And he likes it, Pedro likes it, and it drives everybody else up the wall. There's the Mexican market. Oh, and one of the things that happens is the older sister, here he's stocking up on more toys, action figures. Oh, and he tells about some of the unregulated toys made for children in Mexico by children, including the little pee-pee man, who is this little doll. You take his hat off, pour liquid inside, and then squeeze him, and out comes the pee-pee. Charming, right? Oh, okay, this is what I was going to say is, Lila, the older sister, tells them you cannot drink this stuff that has milk in it, because in Mexico the milk is raw and their stomachs are not used to it. Now, the older kids can drink milk in Mexico because they grew up there, at least part way. They were born in Mexico and grew up a few years there before the parents moved to the U.S. and had kind of the other half of their kids who should not be drinking raw milk. And so Pedro doesn't drink it, or he just has a sip of it. Whereas this one, I forget his name, but anyways, he drinks it before they can tell him not to. And then they're like, what are you guys talking about? And so they rush him back to the motorhome because he's going to have a poop tornado like no other. Just is not good for your stomach, I guess, when you're not used to raw milk. Sure enough, he goes running to the motorhome bathroom. And then here's Dad saying, ¿Qué pasó? Oh, raw milk. Oh. I love the look on their faces. So yeah, it's about the adventures they have, and then they get to Mexico and meet up with their cousins, and most of the people in town are related to them, the parents say. Pedro gets this awful haircut from this old guy who is drinking tequila the whole time that he's cutting his hair, and it does not go well. At least that's what everybody else thinks when they see Pedro's hair. Pedro thinks it's a really cool look, that he looks like the Fonz, which is hilarious. Okay, so this is about this, drawn in this old style here. This is where they're telling about something that happened to the grandfather, how he got beat up and almost killed because he had this haircut that made him look like he was on the Federales side, when actually he was not. And the only thing that saved him was that they saw his cross. His shirt opened and they saw his cross and realized, oh, he's Catholic. Okay, this is embarrassing. We won't kill you. Okay, so here is the grandfather. don't really get a full picture of him for a while, but he's an old guy already. I mean, I say already. But he's super, super strong. Like, here's young, probably 17-year-old older brother, and he can barely lift this bale of hay, whereas grandfather, he just chucks it across to the truck. He's been working outside his whole life, so he's very strong. He's in really good shape. And he does have a picture of him, a couple of photos of him. There he is. That's an early picture of him. And here he's in the newspaper, centenarian, still able to work. He lived until he was 107. So this guy was formidable. And it's really interesting to learn about, his life. We get bits and pieces from older brothers and sisters, and then we find out before he will leave Mexico and go back with them, he has to move his wife's bones, basically, because the cemetery where she's buried, now she died a long time ago, like in the 50s, I think, so it's been almost 30 years. It's been a while. But the cemetery where she's buried is flooding, and so he wants to move her grave to another cemetery before he leaves. And that means they have to dig it up. And this is a really poignant event for Pedro to witness. He goes with his father to dig up the grave with his grandfather, and it's like sad and sweet at the same time. And Pedro's trying to figure out how to describe how he feels, and he's meanwhile thinking about what it must have been like for them to live here back when they were young, when his grandfather and grandmother were young. And it tells a little bit of their history, how they worked so hard on this land, and there was a drought, and when your father was about 16 years old, an airplane flew by and dropped leaflets near their rancho. The flyers advertised job in the cotton fields up near Gomez Palacio. It would be hard work, but it would mean that they would survive. And it was 100 miles away, so what did they do? They walked, of course. It was hard to hear stories about your parents being scared for their lives, being so poor they had to run away to a faraway place in order to make money at 16. Yeah, his dad's already had quite the life, even before he had kids. 9 kids. And he also finds out that his grandparents had a couple other children who did not survive, and I guess they were buried in the same place as Abuelita, the grandmother, and they find a baby's skull, which is very poignant, and they handle it very carefully, and they start finding bones, so they don't get like a whole coffin and then just move the whole coffin. No, the coffin is fallen apart. The bones are jumbled. Some of them are not there because they've been washed away already. So it's a really tough thing for Pedro to see. Of course, for his grandfather to go through. And some of the other kids don't take it so well. His younger brother just wanted to get out of the heat, he said, so he went back to the house. Okay, so then before they leave, of course, they have to have a big party, and everyone in town, it seems like, comes to say goodbye to the grandfather. There's this terrible haircut. So then they go back home, and it's a long trip home as well. They do go a different route, though. They go through Baja California, and they see Puerto Vallarta. But they don't spend a lot of money. I mean, with 9 kids, they can't afford to be spendthrifts. So they eat in town, and then his father talks to one of the waiters and finds out where there's a cheap place outside the tourist zone to stay. And he's always kind of doing that, where he finds, a cheaper way so that they can all still enjoy themselves, but not spend so much money. So then they are on their way home, and the last crazy thing that happens is that they are driving on the freeway and they hit a deer. Where is it? Oh no, that's right. They don't hit a deer. Another car hits the deer. And his father immediately stops and is like, everybody out. And Pedro doesn't know what's going on, but they grab the deer and bring it back into the motorhome. They think it's dead. Yeah, that's a really interesting story. So I won't tell you what happens, but suffice it to say, it is a significant event in Pedro's history. But they all do get back home eventually, and as I already showed you, his grandfather lived quite a while after that and worked with them out in the fields, mainly because he just wanted to be outside with his family and spend time with them, not because he needed to work. So that's a really cool story. I enjoyed it a lot. He's a good storyteller. The art is very accessible. The story's accessible. I think kids will really enjoy it, especially the little details that he makes sure he puts in, like the Pee-Pee Man toys and the way that the kids prank each other, with that many siblings. Of course they're going to. Okay, and so the last one is Beowulf by Zach Weiner. I think that's how you say it. And I didn't know this when I read this, but then I found out at the back in the author's note. I just love the author's notes when they put those in now. They're just so interesting usually. And I found out that this is a retelling of Beowulf, which I thought was fantastic and hilarious at the same time. So the way it is told is from a kid's perspective, as if one of the kids is Beowulf, in this case B, and they have their kingdoms, their little fiefdoms, and different kids are in charge of the different areas. I love the way he draws the kids. They're amazing. They're little powerhouses. And the way he writes the story is the most amazing. It's so fun to read. You can hardly not read it out loud. It's just I don't know how to describe it. It's epic, the way that he writes the story. It's so fun. Many kids marveled at the toy mountain, pleasing its maker. Such plenty! Each plucked toy hid two more, and also a puppy. But Carl, detector of gold, dealt himself nothing, even as those eggs that hatch robots were taken. So this is Carl, the king, who is in charge of one little fiefdom. And it goes on and describes all the fun that they're having, all the sugar they're eating. And this shows the teenagers and how they are not friends with the little kids. So time passes, and then there's another king. The crown passed. And things are going well for the kids. They have this fabulous tree house called Tree Heart. Tree Heart was the hall's name. Skyborn Stronghold. I love that. Skyborn Stronghold. Helmet of kids. Roger's Thanes. Roger is the king now. Roger's Thanes gathered throne-side, thirsty for adventure. I love this alliteration. Thanes, throne-side, thirsty. It's so fun. And of course the adults are not thrilled with Tree Heart. So much noise. And then we have an adult who is really horrible. His name is Grendel, which I guess is like Grendel. I don't know the story of Beowulf that well, but he is a joy gobbler, a grim-faced joy gobbler. And he has this terrible power. Look at this. Oh, he looks like a spider. He's so icky. So he has this terrible power to turn, well, creatures and people old when he touches them with his finger. So like here he's turning a sweet little kitty into an old grim-faced cat. Or he can turn a child who's having fun wearing his underwear on his head into like a 20-year-old. Nobody in charge understands taxes. The real problem with Congress these days. Elastic waistbands withered from undies like time-worn parchment. Eyes paled and lips parted, pouring forth unsought political opinions. So he is got it in for Tree Heart and all who reside there. And a couple of times he tries to get in there, but they hold him off. Well, unfortunately, he eventually gets in and terrorizes the kids, turns most of them into teenagers, takes all of their sugar away and their toys, and cleans Tree Heart, which is horrible. So they go to get help from another fiefdom across the river, which is where Beowulf is. Heidi's Hold. And so they go to get help from her and her warriors. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. I love reading it. And the art is just intense. Intensely cute and powerful and just great. So Beowulf ends up helping them, and they repel Grendel. And I won't give away the end, but just gonna flip through so you can see some of the battle. So this one's a lot of fun. If you like, I don't know, fairy tales and Beowulf, and cute kawaii. Well, it's not really a kawaii style, but it is cute with the teddy bears and the kids and the sugar and sweets that all the kids consume. It's really fun. It's got an endorsement from Neil Gaiman and Lemony Snicket. So how can you go wrong? So that is going to be it for me for this time. Those are the 3 graphic novels that I read recently and really enjoyed, each one in their own way. They're all pretty different, but each one of them was really enjoyable. So I hope that gave you some reading ideas, maybe for you or your kids, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.